Hello, this is Rich Campy, CEO of Pro Advisor Coach, The Thinking Coach. Are you still with us for session 2? Last time we covered a little bit of history, a little bit of background, Dr. Robert S. Hartman, formal axiology. We talked about the 3 different dimensions of thinking, talked about how many thoughts we have per day, 45 to 65,000. So a little bit of an overview. We're going to dive a little bit deeper this time, and we're going to talk about how this all fits together. So the backdrop to all of the Mindscan, we talked about the 3 dimensions, right? Relator, doer, and thinker, and the scientific terms for those are what? Do you remember? Intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic, right? And then those 3 primary dimensions drive all of our thinking that we have. And how many thoughts do we have per day? 45,000 to 65,000 according to Dr. Deepak Chopra. And about 90 to 95% of the thoughts are the same patterns that run again and again and again. So if we're creatures of pattern, and we're running these 3 primary dimensions of thinking, these values, and they're just combinations. Let's go a little bit deeper into that. So what are we measuring? With Dr. Hartman, he realized these 3 dimensions happen within 2 worlds. The world externally, which is the world that I would be communicating with someone else or getting something done or following a process and system, that's external. And then the world inside. Okay, so 3 dimensions happening externally, internally. So an example with the relator area, the intrinsic value, if I'm having a conversation within my head or about my own intrinsic value, my self-empathy, then I may be saying, am I taking care of myself? And, what do I feel today? Right? That's an internal dialogue into the internal world. If I'm going externally, that's a conversation I may be having with someone else about their own intrinsic value, a conversation with Lori around what's going on with her feelings and with her life, or one of our coaches or a partner or a client or a friend, right? That's an external self-empathy area. All right, so that's 2 worlds. So we have 3 dimensions within 2 worlds. So that's the backdrop, always 3 dimensions within 2 worlds. We are measuring, this is what changes. We are measuring 2 things, okay? We're measuring the clarity, which is the size of the circle. So a larger the circle, I have more clear vision, more broad vision of what I'm able to see, to more of a narrow vision, which is more pinpointed. It's more creative when we have a smaller circle, right? Because we're seeing a more narrow perspective of what we can see versus a larger view of what we can see. And then the other part we're measuring is what's called aperture, or the bias or the attention to something. All right, so this is, if we look at this from a photography standpoint, in that the clarity is how focused, or the telephoto lens is. So how clear can we see all of what's going on that's there, whether it's internally or externally. And then the attention, or the bias, is how much light do we let in? Do we have a very fast shutter speed like this, or does the lens stay open a long time? All right, so overly attentive, right, when we're putting a lot of attention by something, would be a large shutter speed, like the light comes in and we let a lot of light in, versus a very fast shutter speed where it's just really quick, right? And so to be aware of these parts, so 4 parts that tie all this together. We have how many dimensions total? 3, right? And then what worlds are they operating in? How many worlds do we have? 2, right? The external and the internal. Then we're measuring clarity, right? Which is how wide, or are we able to see everything going on, and is it really clear, right? Or is it really small and more creative in the way we see it? And then the bias, okay? The up and down the scale, or the aperture, how long the lens stays open. So 4 things, right? We have 3 dimensions, 2 worlds, clarity and bias. 3 dimensions, 2 worlds, clarity and bias. So those are the 4. On our next session, we're going to dive into each one of those, starting with the intrinsic external world, which represents empathy. Okay, and we're going to look at that specific dimension. What does it mean? How do we use it? Where do we go from here? And then we'll follow up with that on the other, basically dimensions. So there'll be 3 dimensions total within 2 worlds, which gives us 6 breakdowns, right? Because we have to go take the relator to the external world, then we have to go the doer to the external world, then we're going to go to the thinker to the external world, then we'll go to the internal world. Relator internally, and then we'll go to the doer internally, and then the thinker internally. So that's our next 6 sessions. We're going to break those down in detail. Then we'll look at the whole team, and then we will focus in on what can we do with this information. Like once we know it, how do we work on ourselves? How do we work with others? How do we coach effectively? And at the end, we'll have a great opportunity for you. If you want to get certified in the Mindscan, certainly can do that. Along the way, I'd encourage you to take the Mindscan. If you haven't taken it yet, go to our website, take it. It's free as part of what we offer, just as a value add. When we're working with people on this, we're charging as much as $500 just to take and do a full in-depth Mindscan review. But if you're able to do that and to take that from our site, go for it, and you'll get a summary report of your top strength and your potential weakness, and go from there. So this is Coach Rich Campy, the Thinking Coach. Looking forward to seeing you next time.